Hey you! Yes, you watching this video right now. I'm about to predict your thoughts on James Cameron's Avatar, and I want to see how accurately I can summarize your experience with the film. Ready? Let's go. The year is late 2009, and you hear about this new film by the director who spends all of his time exploring the oceans, or whatever. It's called Avatar. It's about blue monkeys in space, and it's in 3D. Okay. You buy your tickets and you see it over the Christmas break, and it blows your mind. You've seen spectacles before, but you've never seen anything like this. A full out-of-body experience. Total immersion. You didn't just see Pandora. You were there. You tell your friends and you watch it with them, and then you tell your friends' friends just to get another chance to have that experience. Maybe you see it a fourth time, because what else are you gonna watch in theaters in late January? Finally, you move on. Months pass. You buy the film on Blu-ray and you take it home to watch on your brand new plasma TV. You pop in the disc, sit back, and relax. However, slowly over the course of the runtime, you start to realize that things aren't the same. Is this the film you saw multiple times in theaters? You begin to notice things you didn't notice before. You realize how derivative and recycled the storyline is. Those overly cheesy lines now bug you, whereas before they were part of the charm. Eventually you turn on the film, as you just can't stand its pandering filmmaking.
What the hell have you people been smoking out there?
This is the last time you watch Avatar, and the only time it crosses your mind is when there's an update on those sequels that just keep getting delayed. Remember, Avatar was the highest grossing film of all time, and it held that crown for nearly 10 years, before losing it this July to Avengers Endgame. Few films can claim to change film the way Avatar did. It was a wake-up call for other filmmakers to adapt the way they were making movies, ushering in the digital and 3D era we've yet to fully escape. And yet, so little has been said about the actual film. Despite its meteoric debut, it seems to have left so little impact on discourse in the film community. No one quotes it, no one reenacts iconic moments, it's just kinda there. A punching bag for those who even remember it.
Makes the halo. Is that a line from that movie? It has been so long, I'm pretty sure I haven't rewatched that movie.
Yeah. That's because no one has, John.
Yeah.
No one watched Avatar a second time.
I liked it in theaters and then never returned.
The most culturally insignificant film ever made.
How does a film create this type of reputation? How does a film even acquire the legacy of... Hey, Jonathan here. I'm supposed to document my experience making this review. Apparently it's supposed to help out. Anyway, if we're going to talk about how Avatar lost favorability with its audience, we have to first talk about how it gained that favorability in the first place. Which means... we have to talk about the 3D. When people think of Avatar, they think of 3D. Now, contrary to popular belief, Avatar didn't invent the modern version of 3D. This technology was being heavily utilized by kids and animated films such as Monsters vs. Aliens, Jim Carrey's A Christmas Carol, and even as far back as Spy Kids 3D. Ooh boy. Instead, Avatar was the first of these films to use 3D in a way that actually served the story. For every single one of these films, 3D was a gimmick, a way to have objects burst through the screen to punctuate comedic beats. All of these 3D effects relied on negative space, the space between the screen and the audience. The element that made Avatar's 3D stand out was, oddly enough, its restraint. There isn't a single in-your-face 3D moment in the entire film. Instead, Avatar heavily relied on the positive space in its 3D, the space behind the screen, which gives the frame more depth with many of the objects appearing further from the audience. Whereas the negative space use of 3D can be startling or even invasive, the emphasis on positive space creates a far different effect, drawing the audience closer to the screen as it becomes a window to a larger world. The 3D in Avatar had one goal: to immerse you into Pandora. Pandora is very much the star of Avatar, a beautiful paradise filled with lush colors, inventive wildlife, and striking monuments. The narrative almost serves as a tour guide for this fictional planet, taking us through its many peaks and valleys. Now, we've seen many fictional planets on screen before, but what really sets Pandora apart from its competitors is its tangibility. Nearly every scene on Pandora revolves around interaction, and there are multiple layers of interaction going on here. The protagonist Jake Sully can only experience Pandora to its fullest through his titular avatar. As a human, Jake is restrained by his air mask and broken legs, but in his avatar, Pandora becomes the ultimate playground. The connection Jake has with Pandora through his avatar is the most important relationship in the film. In a way, Jake is our avatar into this world just as Jake's avatar is his. Through this big blue monkey, Jake is able to understand Pandora by physically connecting with it. At the back of his tail are these exposed nerves that can bond Jake to Pandora's wildlife and ecosystem. It's how he rides a dire horse, flies his banshee, and also, well, you know. What makes Pandora truly come to life, however, is how the planet reacts to Jake's avatar. When Jake touches these large plants, they collapse. Or when Jake and Nateri run past these lizards, they spring from the ground and twirl like helicopters. Nateri only trusts Jake in the first place because these wood sprites form a coat around Jake. One of the larger themes in the film is that Eowa, a deity force that lives within Pandora's ecosystem, is subtly guiding its inhabitants and connecting them with each other. Visually, the film communicates this through these little moments of interaction. In almost every scene, Jake is encouraged to touch something. This is also how he solves his problems later in the film. Pandora is almost always providing feedback through the land and creatures. The absolute best touch is how the land will often light up when the Na'vi walk over it. All of these details matter and paint a picture larger than the sum of its parts. Humans are incredibly tactile. We know what it feels like to touch a plant, or climb a tree, or run on the beach. Avatar draws in these sensations, and then complements them with vivid, luminous imagery. Pair this with the emotive motion capture performances created by Weta Digital, and you get one of the best depictions of wonder ever put to film. The 3D in Avatar complements every single moment of interaction, but it's not necessarily needed for the impact of these scenes. This is a gorgeous movie. In fact, it looks better than most blockbusters released today. Visually, it's timeless. So when people say that this film doesn't work without the 3D, I think it speaks to a larger problem than just the visuals. So many of these scenes are built around feeling, and it's shockingly good at evoking that from its audience. But when it comes to expanding on that feeling, or using said feeling to drive the story, it falls shockingly flat. The film meticulously creates connections between the land and people, but then communicates nothing through them. We get to feel Pandora, but we never get to fully understand it. Despite all the interaction Jake has with Pandora, there's still one question that the film never quite answers. What the fuck is unobtainium? Now, I am not the first, nor the last person to point out that the plot to Avatar was simple. This has been known since the day audiences first saw the film, and it's always been justified being simple in order to serve the larger story of Pandora. Nevertheless, the simplicity of the plot and the simple-minded nature of its villains has always been a point of contention. I actually forgot how cartoonish these goons were before my rewatch, and let me tell you, they are a treat.
Shut your pie hole!
Or what? Ranger Rick, you gonna shoot me?
I can do that.
Now, one thing I want to make absolutely clear is that simple does not equal bad. Mad Max Fury Road is my favorite film of the decade, and its plot and villains are just as simple and over the top as Avatar's.
I had a baby brother! I had a little baby brother! And he was perfect! Perfect in every way!
However, where Fury Road vastly succeeds beyond Avatar is how it allows its cartoonish villains to live through meaning and metaphor. Whether it be the cult of death that drives the War Boys, the controlling hypermasculinity of Immortan Joe and his son, or the resource throttling of the Citadel, these villains stand for and represent something. And the villains in Avatar stand for unobtainium. In the first act, we learn how the entirety of the human plot, including the Avatar program, revolves around unobtainium, a rare metal found only on Pandora, though the actual function of this metal is never explored beyond this simple explanation.
Because this little gray rock sells for 20 million a kilo. That's the only reason.
That's it. Greed. I'm actually very surprised at the lack of unobtainium throughout the rest of the film. Not once do we see the Na'vi use it or interact with it, or even see how the unobtainium interacts with Pandora. It's only ever a pot of gold buried in the Na'vi's backyard. Compare this to, say, Marvel Studios' Black Panther, which has a plotline centered around a similar precious metal, but instead uses the function of this metal to drive the story. In Black Panther, vibranium is the key resource that allows the nation of Wakanda to become so advanced as well as seclude themselves from the troubles of the rest of the world. The use of this metal becomes challenged by the film's antagonist Eric Killmonger, who aims to take control of Wakanda purely so that he can use the vibranium to liberate the enslaved people of the world. The metal isn't just a story catalyst, but also the vessel that drives the film's themes and ideas. Beyond Pandora, we don't even know what the function of the unobtainium is on Earth. If you want to add nuance to the villains, this is where you'd put it. In the opening scenes of the film, the Earth environment Jake lives in resembles that of a generic cyberpunk city. So sticking to the tropes of that genre, what if we established during these scenes that Earth was slowly dying? However, this special metal unobtainium, found only on the planet Pandora, turns out to be the key for survival or even comfortable life here back on Earth. This connection would add a lot of depth and meaning to this overly simple story. We could see that the humans are willing to destroy another planet, one with its own life and wonders, in order to save their own, spreading the damage done to Earth like a disease. The cartoonish negligence that the humans possess could reflect a very real desperation that the audience can register and relate with. I really do believe that the surest way to make an endurable film is to give the film an endurable villain. We want our villains to share our fears and our pain and our dreams, and Avatar's villain just wants to get home for dinner.
This is Papa Dragon. I want this mission high and tight. I want to be home for dinner.
The blunt and cartoonish nature of these villains purely exists so that we can root against them for our new love of Pandora. Their goals only matter to threaten our planet. For instance, these goons spend the entire movie laying out how they need the Na'vi to leave Home Tree so that they can extract the unobtainium. But the minute they finally destroy Home Tree, they leave. And for the rest of the film, we never see them return. Now, do I think these characters suddenly halted their progress? No, but the film itself is not interested with their plans. If the film doesn't care, then why should we? With the lack of interest given to these villains, they actually end up looking incredibly inconsistent and contradictory. Here's a key example. The escalating action for the human-Na'vi conflict is the human demolition of the Tree of Voices, a sacred site where the Na'vi can hear their past ancestors. The antagonist Parker Selfridge... Wait. Selfridge? Selfridge? The antagonist Parker Selfridge explains it away by saying,
You know what? You throw a stick in the air around here, it's gonna land on some sacred fern, for Christ's sake.
This furthers the notion that these characters don't respect nor even understand the land they're tearing down.
What the hell have you people been smoking out there?
However, when Grace is reflecting on the chaos that's happening, she suggests further motive.
They bulldozed a sacred site on purpose to trigger a response.
This rings incredibly untrue given the context of how they're presented. Do they understand Pandora's ecosystem? Or don't they? Are they negligent? Or are they deceptive? When Papa Dragon discovers that Jake is no longer Team Human, he pulls up the vlogs he's been making this whole movie and discovers that the Na'vi are impossible to move from Home Tree, leading him to begin his military strike.
They're never gonna leave Home Tree.
To me, what would have been a far more effective reveal is if he had been watching Jake's vlogs and keeping tabs on him the whole time. What if Papa Dragon and his military buddies were also studying the Na'vi and Pandora, purely so they could best exploit them? Not only would this make the villains all the more compelling and intimidating, but it could also add to the fear that drives their characters. Why and how characters pursue power is one of the most important things in fiction, and I can't think of a single film that handles this better than Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. Dawn is in many ways the anti-Avatar, a film that shows a human and creature contact story from the creature's perspective, a film that is far more concerned with the flaws in its apes than the dickishness in its humans. In comparison to Avatar, the elements that really makes the film stand out is how it centers its conflict around power, both the power of individuals and actual power, electricity. A quick plot summary. 10 years after the ape-produced simian flu destroyed most of the world's population, the escaped apes have set up their own colony that is prosperous, growing, and relatively incident-free. This peace is upended when a group of desperate humans stumble upon the apes in the wild. They are in this area to look for a dam that will potentially restore power to the local San Francisco area, giving the survivors electricity and contact with the outside world. Like Avatar, this critical dam is located right next to the apes' home. However, in this scenario, the humans don't need to destroy anything to get to it. Hypothetically, the humans can restore power to find refuge while the apes continue their peaceful lives. And they do for a bit. The apes even help the humans with the dam to speed up this process. This conflict doesn't have a predetermined endpoint of violence, especially as the leaders Caesar and Malcolm form a trusting relationship. Things have the potential to work out. So when this happens, it becomes all the more heartbreaking. The ape antagonist Koba doesn't lead the assault against the humans purely out of hate or disgust. Instead, it all comes from fear. Koba understands that the humans gaining power would give them the dominant position in this two-way relationship, which for someone who grew up being operated on by humans can only mean bad news. The apes held control before because they could thrive without electricity. Plus, the humans having power gives them contact with the rest of the world, which could further help tip the scales. Koba simply can't have this, so he does unspeakable things and becomes the monster the humans think he is to prevent this all from happening. Through the relationship between Koba and Caesar, the film becomes a Shakespearean tale on power, fear, and responsibility, tackling the difference between what's good for your people and what's simply good. It's not only a story about people, power, and land, but also about how these three elements connect and inform each other. More importantly, this is just great storytelling and it will last. Avatar isn't interested in these connections. It never once posits how the humans can interact with Pandora other than being a cancer. Despite all the detail put into this world, those details have nothing to say about the humans that venture there. The plot mechanics that drive the film are so thin and disposable that any deeper reading on the film's themes and ideas sort of becomes laughable. So, if Avatar isn't about unobtainium, and it isn't about people, and it isn't even really about Pandora, then what is it even about?
When I was lying there in the VA hospital, with a big hole blown through the middle of my life, I started having these dreams of flying. I was free. Sooner or later, though, you always have to wake up.
Avatar is a film about dreams. It's about a regular dude down on his luck who every day closes his eyes and leaves his body. And then, he gets to do all the things he never could. He can freely roam a lush paradise. He can fly a banshee. He gets a smoking hot girlfriend. And he also gets to run. Before, he was a nobody. But now, he's the most important man in the world. Of course, Jake is supposed to be there to conduct scientific research and also commit espionage, but the new experience is all he's after, an escape from the life he's got. It's often been said that films are dreams, or a collective dream shared by the audience. We enter a dark room and are transported to places we've never been and live lives we've never had. Dreams can be anything. They can challenge us and bring the troubles of the real world into the dream, or they can be their own isolated dose of fun. Using this dream metaphor, horror films are obviously nightmares. If we were to place films on a dream-type spectrum of how much films deal with real-world problems, with the extremes being full-on confrontation and outright avoidance, Avatar would be the furthest film on the avoidance scale. It's pure escapism. It's only escapism. It's why the film feels incomplete if not viewed in the IMAX 3D format. Honestly, it has more in common with a Disney World attraction than any feature narrative, which is probably why it was turned into a Disney World attraction. But I'm here to judge the film as a narrative, and it's pretty clear that the film's commitment to pure escapism actively hurt its storytelling. Consider how Jake's mission is to find a way to get the Na'vi out of Home Tree, yet he spends most of his time exploring Pandora and its wonders. He barely speaks to or gets to know any of the other Na'vi, such as Moat and Etukan, the spiritual and clan leaders respectively. The only Na'vi he really gets to know is Neytiri, and yeah, it's not hard to see why. Jake isn't truly interested in the well-being of the Na'vi or the evacuation of Home Tree. He's interested in keeping the dream alive. There is one scene in the film that actually has genuine drama and confrontation, and it's a scene where Jake tells the Na'vi that an attack is coming, and more importantly, that he's always known about it.
that they sent me here to learn your ways. So one day I could bring this message and that you will believe it.
Notice how when he talks about the value of Pandora, he uses very possessive language.
Okay, I fell in love. I fell in love with the forest and with the Kaya people.
I fell in love. I. Pandora only matters to how it relates to him. This explanation obviously doesn't work for Neytiri.
You will never be one of the people!
And you know what? She's right. The understanding that Jake and the Na'vi made their agreement over was false, and so Jake's connection to these people and land is forfeit. This is the one great scene in Avatar, and sadly after this, the film's handling of its escapism at the expense of its story only gets worse. To make it up to the Na'vi, Jake captures the massive Banshee Torque through dumb luck. This is the most macho bullshit ever. My dragon's bigger than yours. It's trust through dominance. The Na'vi immediately forgive Jake and follow his lead as opposed to Jake following theirs. The latter approach would enhance the film's themes of respecting the land and people, but the former creates a stronger power fantasy. I will say that the final battle is pretty fantastic, maybe the best directed CG action scene in a live-action film. The creatures of Pandora coming to save the day is a great payoff and easily the highlight of the finale. Thematically it fits well, with Eywa and Pandora being this greater power that the humans can barely comprehend. But still, Jakey Boy's power fantasy matters more, so he's the one who gets to take down the dropship in spectacular fashion. Now, the sequencing of this battle has always puzzled me. This should be the climactic moment. It's the Death Star blowing up, the release of tension as all the Na'vi are saved, and yet it comes roughly 2/3 into the finale. This battle rages on, as Jake still has to duke it out with Papa Dragon, who shifts his focus from wiping out the Na'vi to destroying Jake's dream.
You think you're one of them? Time to wake up.
The sequencing of these events tells us that Jake's avatar is more important than the safety of Pandora. Preserving Jake's fantasy has been the purpose all along. After the final battle, all the humans leave Pandora except a select few including Jake, who ends the film by permanently transferring his consciousness to his avatar body. His dream is now a reality, and he no longer has to worry about waking up. And that's the final message of this film: to escape. All those troubles you had at home, yeah, just leave those behind and come to Pandora, where all your problems will vanish. Only, that's not very relatable. Hell, I would even call that an outright lie. In what world can all our dreams come true without the crushing weight of reality? Furthermore, what lessons are the audience supposed to take away into our own lives? Fuck Earth and escape to our dreams? The theatrical experience of this film is impeccable, but outside the theater, it holds nothing of value. And all of this is really a shame, as James Cameron is one of my favorite filmmakers. His films are constantly overflowing with innovative ideas, empowering characters, and filmmaking decades ahead of their time. His films activate the mind and please the soul. They're the reason why so many of us dream film. His films in particular understand the power of dreams. Many of these images are so vivid that they could only come from a dream. Dreams are also incredibly important to his characters. They can terrify or motivate them, or even be the light at the end of their tunnel.
Can I dream? Yes, honey.
Dreams are so important that before Avatar, James Cameron had already made a powerful film about them. A film that also broke box office records and also won 11 Academy Awards. I think you know what film I'm talking about. So, are you ready to go back to Titanic? In 1997, James Cameron put just as much effort into resurrecting the Titanic as he did creating Pandora. Every single element, from the patterns on the walls to the physics of how the ship sank, were recreated with stunning accuracy. Yet despite the overwhelming attention to detail, the real reason why the Titanic was brought back to life was the human story at the center of it. These fictional humans are the beating heart of this very real tragedy, and the relationship between these two elements is what drives the narrative. How truth impacts fiction, and how reality impacts dreams. The film itself captures real-life footage of the sunken Titanic, and then seamlessly transitions towards the behemoth soundstage that the rest of the film is shot on. There's a completely different look between these scenes. The ones set in modern day have a very stylish blue look to them, with the acting being mostly restrained and naturalistic. The scenes in the past, however, have a hyper-saturated look, booming with warm reds and yellows. Pair this with the over-the-top acting from the supporting cast, and you have the film making a very clear distinction, that this is reality, and this is memory. This style and presentation are all informed by our narrator Rose, who tells her story of surviving the Titanic to a team of treasure hunters looking for a rare diamond she possessed at the time. While the event for others is defined by death and destruction, for her it's defined by love, as most of her tale chronicles her blossoming romance with Jack Dawson. Rose was miserable well before the Titanic struck the iceberg, as she was forced into marriage at the age of 17 with this douche nozzle in order to serve her family's finances. Her future seemed similar to that of many others on the boat, trapped and doomed for despair. Her situation was so bleak that she even attempted to take her own life on the ship. Enter Jack Dawson, a kid with no money to his name just looking to do what's right. After he talks her out of jumping, the two continue to meet and bond as Jack's artistic and rebellious nature begins to free Rose from her restricting peers. This is the key to their relationship, how his street rat roots contrasts and eventually breaks her free from her formal upbringing. This parallels the film's overall theme of classism, which is obviously driven by the fact that most people who died on the Titanic were lower-class citizens, while the upper-class bribed their way onto the lifeboats. Most importantly, this change in perspective for Rose gives her a newfound sense of identity and purpose. Her romance with Jack is as much about personal discovery as it is sexual discovery. The romance in Avatar, on the other hand, is far less impactful, as it mostly consists of flirtatious looks given during Neytiri's training lessons. To Jake, Neytiri is only an extension of Pandora's beauty. On the surface, the romances in Titanic and Avatar share a lot in common. Both Jake and Rose befriend their polar opposite, spending time together exploring new locations and having their worldview expanded. In these films, the backdrop is just as important as the romance. Both films have the same end of Act 2 crisis, with the Titanic hitting the iceberg and the destruction of Home Tree spiraling the lovers into action. Their love is tested right as their worlds begin to crumble. For their entire runtimes, the romances in Titanic and Avatar are about giving Rose and Jake a better life, cemented with their newfound companion. For Jake, everything works out just fine. The destruction of Home Tree was merely a blip on his radar, as he swiftly reforms his relationship with the Na'vi and manages to fight back the mean humans. But Rose's story doesn't end so gracefully. The entire tone and atmosphere completely shifts in the harrowing final act of Titanic. Nothing is romanticized here, as every escalation of this tragedy is recreated in vivid detail. It's as though Rose's memory has sharpened, reliving the physical and emotional stimulation through trauma. The last hour becomes a frantic chase in and out of the Titanic, as Jack and Rose attempt to save friends, strangers, and each other from the impending doom of the freezing water. Rose is given the chance to escape on the lifeboats, but refuses to abandon Jack to the doomed ship. During the Titanic's final moments, Jack and Rose are only fighting for each other, for one more chance to keep their dream alive.
Jack! This is where we first met!
But of course, they can't, as their hope for survival sinks with the ship. Jack gets Rose some refuge from the water, but is quickly taken by the cold of the Atlantic. With her life destroyed and lover gone, Rose lets rescue pass by, closing her eyes for good so she can stay with Jack. But then, she wakes up, and fights through the cold to find safety. This act is important not only because every life matters, but because her act of survival is how she keeps Jack alive. The Titanic was a tragedy. This is a tale of loss. The film has us fall in love with the ship and the patrons and Jack Dawson, and then it takes them away from us, as though they never existed. But, as the film has thoroughly shown up until this point, these people and moments live on, through the memory of the survivors and the stories we tell about them. That these stories, real or fake, have an impact, and can ultimately make us better people. The final scene is where all of these themes are cemented, not only by Rose returning the heart of the ocean to where it belongs, but also with her finally resting. The photos on Rose's bedside show her doing the things that Jack said they'd do together. Jack's dreams live through Rose, and Jack comes to life in Rose's dreams. In the final scene, Rose could be sleeping, or maybe she's passed beyond. But regardless, she can return to the place and people that meant the world to her. For a ship known primarily for its death, Titanic is a film most interested in how it lived. The Celine Dion song in the credits literally spells this out. Call Titanic melodramatic, call it simple, but you know what? It's impactful. Not only in how we as a society can recontextualize tragedy, but how it lets us escape and dream in spite of the horror surrounding it. The film holds the power of the dream because it keeps it a dream, one that will ultimately make us happier and richer for when we finally wake up. Despite their striking similarities, Titanic and Avatar come to completely different conclusions on how we should embrace dreams. One says they're a tool for life, the other says they're a replacement. If you haven't noticed, I find Titanic's conclusion to be far more resonant, that dreams truly gain their value when they combat the harshness of reality. The harsher the reality, the stronger the dream. By fully confronting this darkness, Titanic as a film is given weight and endurance. So many of its iconic moments and shots land because of how they fully communicate this struggle. It's not just memorable filmmaking, it's meaningful filmmaking. Titanic is a film that'll last. 30 to 50 years from now, it'll still hold its power, whereas Avatar will just be seen as a tech demo, a footnote in the viewing and filmmaking habits of its generation. But what if Avatar ended differently? What if it came to a different conclusion on dreams? What if Avatar actually told a story? Now, I'm not about to dive into a 120-page rewrite of the entire script. Instead, I'm only going to suggest one change that I think would have made a world of a difference to its impact. A change that would thematically align itself closer to Titanic. So we're at the climactic battle. The Na'vi are losing, Eowa has sent the creatures, and Jake is still in the fight. At this point, through the staging of the action, Jake realizes that in order to protect the Na'vi and the Tree of Souls, he may need to sacrifice his avatar. Where his actions before were about self-preservation, this will be a selfless act for Pandora, a proper act of love. Whether he goes down with the ship or he loses his fight with Papa Dragon, Jake's avatar needs to die. He needs to lose the dream. The staging of the final fight as is lends itself perfectly to this conclusion. In the film, Neytiri frees herself and shoots Papa Dragon before he can kill Jake's avatar. But what if she were just a few seconds late? What if this were an act of revenge? Neytiri would comfort Jake as the life leaves his eyes, then grieve over her fallen lover. But then she would hear something, a noise coming from Jake's pod. And then the scene from the film would continue as it happens, with Neytiri saving Jake by getting him his air mask. If this scene happened under the context that Jake's avatar died, I think this could have been a very powerful moment, that Jake and Neytiri's bond transcends their biological connection. Despite having his link to this world being taken from him, for this moment at least, he's still a part of it. Out of respect for the Na'vi, and because he no longer has his avatar, Jake would join the humans as they leave Pandora, and eventually he would find himself back where his journey started, his dingy apartment. This is the most important part of any hero's journey, the journey home. His legs aren't fixed, and he's still financially broke, but this would not be a defeat, as his experience on Pandora has given him a newfound purpose to improve his world. Earth has its wonders, it can still be saved, and whenever the troubles of Earth get him down, Jake can always escape to Pandora in his dreams. The purpose of this analysis isn't to dismiss escapism as an art form. We all need a break sometimes. We need films that lift our spirits, take us to magical places, and present us with a world far simpler than our own. But we also need stories that matter, and the ones that matter, they don't shy away from darkness and consequence. They don't hand their heroes a happily ever after on a silver platter. Whether they take place on a fictional planet, a historical moment, or the city you live in, every great story has something to say about the things you can do right here on Earth.